We stand up together, we grow out together. This is where we attempt to kind of answer the question behind all the questions, namely, given the talent and the funding and the desire and the networks and the individuals that already exist in Spain and Portugal, what's stopping health research here from having greater global impact? Are there any reasons why the South cannot lead Europe or lead the world, or at least be up there in those Champions League finals? Now, if anyone had any doubts before this meeting, we've clearly had overwhelming evidence in the last, less than 24 hours, for the breadth, the depth of research in Iberia, the strength of infrastructure, the capacity of networks, the innovation, the imagination, and all the rest. But we've also had hints as to where there's room for improvement, problems, difficulties, shortages, projects that would not be happening were it not for La Caixa. So there is room for improvement, but there is always room for improvement. Provided you can get them, you can always get more, throw more money, more people, more effort at problems, and you will see things get at least marginally better. But how can we do it more effectively and more efficiently, so we're not just throwing money away? Do we need new centres of excellence, new ways of sharing knowledge, new types of funding, new emphasis on entrepreneurship, new approaches to attracting and retaining talent, new pathways from academia to research and from research to clinical practice, and most critically, how can and should La Caixa most wisely use its funds and its efforts to help with that? Now, clearly, a lot of these things we've already touched on in previous sessions, but the goal in this closing part of this meeting is, as Johnny Mercer put it in song nearly 80 years ago, to accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative. I don't want to end us with moans about how much better it is over there or what the problem is. I want to end up with practical strategies. I've just come out of my half of the parallel sessions where we were talking about moving from fundamental research to clinical practice, and I was really happy that we came up with quite a long list of things that are achievable that can be done, and I imagine it was the same in the other session as well. So we want strategies, fixes, and suggestions for putting Iberian theory in practice, and how research here can, if not conquer the world, then at least become a greater presence on the global landscape. We've got 3 top researchers to kick us off, and then I'm really hoping the discussion is going to be driven by yourselves. And it can be stuff that they have touched upon, but also stuff that you think needs to be mentioned if it hasn't come up in the conversation. As ever, I'm going to keep the introductions very brief for our panel, but I stress in all cases I could go on about them at great length, and I'm sure many higher authorities than me will do. So just like Josep Dalmau in my last session, that's if you were with me in clinical research, and why weren't you if you weren't? Elías Campo is from IDIBAPS in Barcelona. In fact, he is the director there. Now, IDIBAPS stands for Institut d'Investigacions Biomèdiques August P. I. Sunyer, which translates as the August P. I. Sunyer Biomedical Research Institute. There, Elías leads a CaixaResearch Health project on the most common form of leukemia among adults in the Western world, chronic lymphocytic leukemia. As well as being in charge of IDIBAPS, he's director of research at the Hospital Clínic of Barcelona, and he's on record both as a champion and pioneer of precision medicine, and also as saying that although Spain has excellent researchers, the system is, quotes, very fragile, close quotes. Now, one of the reasons for saying that may be his experience leading the Spanish element of the International Cancer Genome Consortium, where Spain opted not to take part in the second phase of the collaboration, something he found, and I'm quoting again, frustrating, and which may be what he may want to talk about now. Please welcome our first panelist, Elías Campo.
Many thanks. I have to start talking? Oh my God.
Maybe we should have told you that.
I thought I was going to be more accompanied. Thank you very much for the introduction. You quoted 2 aspects that, yes, I recognize as elements very important in my career. Josep Dalmau in the previous edition, in the previous session, was defining himself as a clinician scientist. I would say the same. I am a pathologist. Every week on Fridays and Wednesday afternoon, I see the biopsies of the patients, and I combine this with my research and some years ago of the management of this big institute in Spain, in Barcelona. And some years ago, I had the privilege of our project, our proposal that I presented with my colleague from Oviedo, Carlos López-Otín. Our project to participate in the International Cancer Genome Consortium was selected by the ministry to represent Spain in this big consortium. And we were able to sequence for the first time the genome of this leukemia. But the tango between the two groups was extraordinary because we were able to generate in 5 years more than 60 papers that changed the view from the genomic perspective of this disease, because this genomic information was always my concern was that we have to put this information in the context of a clinical annotation of the patients. And we have the samples of collected the samples of more than 1,000 papers, all of them with a clinical record follow-up up to 20 years, and all this information was instrumental to generate this information. And after this, they gave us funding for 5 years. We were able to manage the 5 years turn into 8. So with the same money, we were able to work for 8 years. But then at the end of the 8 years, the international consortium was to a second round of in which the emphasis was going to be to put the genomic context in the context of the clinical problems. And in spite of our success, I was telling in the final meeting of the ICGC, there was a rank of all the 28, 30 projects that were presented. Our CLL project, our leukemia project, was the one that had generated the highest number of papers, whatever you want to say, but we were the ones that with very high rank information. The ministry, the Spanish agencies decide not to go to the second international consortium. Fortunately, La Caixa came to our rescue, and our first project 4 years ago was approved, so we could continue on this project. And now, fortunately, we have the second. We are moving these genomic studies always with this mentality that the samples are from patients extremely well annotated. Now we are moving to study the evolution of the genome in relationship to the complex evolution of the different patients. And also now we are moving to single cell analysis, but always with this mentality that this information has to be generated in the context of very well clinical annotated patients. I don't know if that serves as an introduction.
It does. Thank you. I'm sorry for surprising you, but you get on stage before you were going to do that. So thank you for the moment. Stay there, because everybody else is going to be, I think, equally brief as well. 2 other members of our panel. First of those is Maria Mota, Executive Director of the Institute of Molecular Medicine in Portugal, where they developed a COVID test in just a few weeks. And she leads a CaixaResearch Health project on the role of the liver in malaria infection. Besides being an advocate for women in science, Maria has huge experience working in the USA, but came back to Portugal with the very deliberate aim of making the country a more appealing place to do research. She says that she decided, rather than complain, she'd try to reform the system from within. So how are those changes going? What can we learn to do and not to do from how things work in the US? Our second panelist is Maria Mota.
Thank you. I prefer before sitting to introduce myself. So I work on malarias, it was said, but in fact I'm a basic researcher. I work on a disease that I probably never saw anyone sick with malaria. I saw a few, but really is not really my day. I work on malaria because I became fascinated. I'm still, in love with a parasite that is called Plasmodium that causes malaria. And really I study in that the relationship that this parasite, established with us, and how, in evolution terms, how the two of us came together, and we are not be able to get rid of this parasite for so many years. We know the Plasmodium for more than 100 years. 3 Nobel Prizes went in, and we still have 600,000 children dying every year that are below 5 years of age. So that is what I work on. But one aspect that I wanted to bring here is that, we were in a session that says it takes two to play a tango. And I was saying that, it takes an entire forest to make a special tree. Okay, to be honest, and I really think is what I would like to discuss is what could be the role of La Caixa on this, but really what we could be so stronger here is that we come as a community, Portugal and Spain, and really make an amazing forest that La Caixa could be one of the caretakers and could be a very important caretaker. And I think this will take a very important role on having, as any good tree, very good roots. So you need really very good fundamental science for that to do. Because imagine that you go to someone's house and you take, a big, bag of apples. It makes the thing, if the apples are really good, it will make people be happy, you eat apples. But in a few days, the apples would have disappeared. And sometimes I say that it's like what we have with, clinical research is a little bit like that. Of course, it serves the purpose, is really the final goal, is to improve the health of human beings. But at the same time, we need to think that we always need new knowledge, the roots that will provide the new apples again. So I really think these need to be really side by side, and is something, as our experience in Portugal, in our institute, we are trying to do, is that side by side, but without forgetting that the roots need to be really, really strong. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. At least one partial help will be if your special tree is an apple tree, quite clearly as well. Only one panellist remains before we get to your questions and comments. And it's one that I think many of you will be familiar with, Valentín Fuster. Like Dr. Francisco Sanchez Madrid, who we heard from yesterday, he's at CNIC, Spain's National Centre for Cardiovascular Research. He helped create the centre back in 2005, a kind of first-of-its-kind joint venture between the Spanish government and the private sector, including the La Caixa Foundation. Valentín leads a you-know-who funded project investigating the links between atherosclerosis and non-inherited genetic mutations in blood cells, with the goal of using DNA sequencing to spot those at risk much earlier before they've shown signs of the disease. He's a physician as well as a researcher, something we've been hearing a bit about, and has served in many different roles, including being director of the Cardiovascular Institute and physician-in-chief at the Mount Sinai Medical Center in New York, and perhaps for purposes of this discussion, most significantly, having briefly been president of the Health Advisory Board to the Spanish government. He resigned after only a few months because it was, quote, inactive. Your applause, please, for Valentín Fuster.
Well, thank you very much. I was not supposed to give a speech, but I can spend 3 minutes saying something. Professionally, I'm a hybrid person. I had my MD in Barcelona, PhD at the University of Edinburgh, spent 12 years at the Mayo Clinic. I was in the Harvard system for a few years, and now at Mount Sinai in New York. With all of these, one day I was called. There is a center in Madrid that maybe you might be interested on. And one of the issues is that as I was medical student, I was very frustrated how things were going. The teachers were not the professors and so forth. And I said, maybe I can contribute something. So this is how the National Center of Cardiovascular Investigation, we started actually in 2006. And I'm so happy that 5 of us are here from the National Center of Cardiovascular Investigation in Madrid. So here's the situation. About my research, I'm not going to talk about it. Basically, I had some crisis, existential crisis 10 years ago, and I decided that after working so hard on what disease is all about, atherothrombotic disease, I decided to move into health, because I became very aware that we knew more about disease than what are the defense mechanisms that maintain us healthy. This has been my driving force in the last 10 years. But what I would like to perhaps to say is, being between United States and Spain, I think there are 4 or 5 issues that I think are important to be discussed today. I'm going to give an index, no more than, then we can have discussion. First, the culture of investigation. Can we improve the culture in Spain? What investigation means? Second, basic clinical interaction. Quite different if I am a basic investigator working in an institute that is just investigation without clinical patients, versus if I am a basic investigator working in a hospital. Completely different. We can discuss that. The next question is the private-public funding. Private could be pharmacological companies or could be non-pharmacological companies. And I want to make very clear that when we went into CNIC, I decided not to work with pharmaceutical companies, to create a bias and so forth. The other issue is we had a meeting with investigators of the United States and Queen Letizia about 4 days ago in New York. And one of the issues is you can leave the country, go to the United States, but how can I get back to Spain? That's another issue. And finally, what is better? The talent of an individual, regardless of the age, or you stop an individual to be further in an academic institution because it reaches a certain age. I think this is very critical issues today. So this is no more than an index of what I would like, at least the discussion to evolve, and I'm very happy to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Valentín. So that's the index. Now we start turning the pages and seeing what's on them. And maybe we should start, given that both of you, Maria and Valentín, you've got extensive experience in the United States. What are the positives we can take from there that will work here, rather than going, it's great in the United States, but that's the United States? What can we take from there? Maria?
I think we can take it a lot of things. First of all, our government should take the level of funding that is provided, because obviously the United States also have another aspect that is private funding that is huge, and in our countries is still small. But we cannot forget that even in the United States, it was the government funding that is really pulling the other. They need to provide the trust. Okay, so really, in terms of funding, yes, that would be something incredibly good if we were able to convince. And again, as a private foundation like Caixa, would have a lot of, I'm sure, of communication with governments in Portugal and Spain, and should be able to convince our, governments to put more money into science. That is one part, is funding. Then is the culture, okay? And the culture in the United States is a culture of discovery. And yesterday talking to Carlos Ribeiro, we were talking and say we should not talk about basic or fundamental research, it's discovery research. And discovery research could be in many different aspects, but there is a culture, at least when I was there in New York, there is a culture that is really a pleasure for discovery. And that is one of the most basic aspect of being a human being. We are curious, and as curious we need to understand the world around us, and so we need to discover and understand the world around us. And until now, there is no better tool than science to do that, correct? Of course, philosophy attempts to do that. Arts does that as well. Or you can, religion, obviously. But the most pragmatic way and the most efficient way is science. So we really need to convince that should be the culture. And it's not a culture only then in the government, because we cannot put all in government. It's also of the entire society. Society needs to understand how important is science, and that should be part of our culture, that we would like to have scientists working to discover the world around us.
That at least low level of scientific literacy, which we need, and as Elías was indicating, would be benefit enormously if that applied to government as well, to actually appreciate what these things are. Valentín?
Yeah, I would say the highest priority is exactly what you said, is to create a culture. This is very close to the funding, though. They go together. And I can give you 2 examples. I am age 79, and I was just signed a contract for 5 more years. It all has to do with academic, not age. So you can see what a difference. In Spain, I think this would be impossible, I suspect. So the other thing is, in December in Spain every year, there are the 100 people who most have contributed to society. You see 1 or 2 scientists there, and you see everybody else. So I think we have to really make a change. And I admire the investigators in Spain because it's a resilient, that you are working actually in a society that, culturally speaking, is not prepared. So, and I think meetings like the one we have here today, they create this fertilizer that people begin to know. The Caixa now, people know that is the #1 funding private source in the country right now. So I think I feel quite positive. If I go back 10, 15 years when I started CNIC, it's quite different today, much more positive. So I am an optimist.
That's good.
No, I am.
Yeah.
And I think, but we have to really move in having these meetings, and certainly, I think the media has a lot to do, because the media has influence on the public. So, and then we have many other issues, the basic clinical investigation, but I'd like to focus into what you discussed, because I think this is a critical issue that has impact on funding and so forth.
And I'm from the media, so I'm interested because this is pretty much the first time that's come up, and obviously I'm biased, but I think that's a key factor.
It is a
in
key
terms
factor.
of bridging the gap between the research and not just the public, but between those in government as well, to make them understand why this is valuable. Elias, do we need to be slightly careful though, because if we're starting to talk about adding in all these elements, do we need to make sure the system is a bit more robust to start with? Because you've talked about how fragile it is.
Well, when I said this sentence, and I still remember very well, was the feeling that, as we saw in the data that were presented yesterday, in the capacity of the Spanish and Portuguese scientific community to generate data and have an impact, even in patents that we could discuss, but I think we are doing well. But my feeling is all that is very fragile in the sense that many of the things that we are building are just based on a personal commitment of many people, and we have very weak infrastructures to sustain and make advance. Our infrastructure in many aspects of the scientific community is very weak. Our research centers have a budget that cannot maintain many of the basic infrastructure in terms of equipment. And then we were discussing this morning how important two aspects are extremely important to generate translational research, that are data and samples, and how we build a robust system to generate data that might be shared for the community, how we can build samples that were very annotated and available for the community, how we maintain, we have a structure that we have good programs for projects, but science is more than just a project today and 3 years. We are here researchers that we have as already an age, but I really support what Valentín is saying, but age in the sense that behind we have created very solid lines of research with data, samples, information, groups. All depends on getting the next project for the next 5 years, well, 5 years, 3 years. That's something that we discussed yesterday. So we are going 3 years in 3 years. When we have built collections of data, collections of information that I think they will deserve a more solid structure that can get us go a little thinking beyond, because we don't have solid structures. It's very difficult to imagine risky projects ahead. No? So I think it's important to see what our scientific community needs to make it more robust, more solid, that allow us to go with more risky projects.
And if you only fund projects that are effectively iterations of other work that's already taking place, you never get that amazing breakthrough, which you have to sometimes have other projects going nowhere for in order to get those occasional things.
But I have to add something, though. that is positive, that networks, national and international. I mean, today, whether there are other Lucran or whether there are other, I think something is evolving very positively, which are the networks that really put these people together with national and international people who are in the same level. And I think this is something new that in the last 5, 7, 10 years, that I think, in my view, is very, very positive because it creates really a force.
In terms of evolution, for example, for Portugal specifically, Portugal started later, okay? And so it's been an amazing evolution. I don't doubt it, okay? It's really amazing, I think, what we were able. But I totally agree that everything is really on the brink of, we are always so fragile. Our institutions don't have, I always like to give this example. In 2017, we really got a professional. For the first time, we got a professional, in our institute, we got a professional financial director, okay? So someone that came and could study the institute and everything. And he accepted the job, he accepted the challenge, but the first thing that he told us, he said, I don't know if you know, but you don't have any plan or any ability to be sustainable above 3 years' time, okay? So he told us that, and, it's the first time that of course I knew because we live project by project, okay? But he really told us there is no plan, there is nothing, so the institute probably will close in 3 years' time. Of course, what you needed to understand is that things are always rolling, but is the thing is that you have really institutions, more than the entire structure, but the institution itself, themselves are really, really very fragile, and seems that we are always in the brink of closing. And with that, of course, we try not to transmit that to I'm a researcher as well, I'm direct, but we try to not transmit that in a daily basis or never to our scientists, okay, because we really want to provide, an environment of freedom that they really can fly. But it's difficult to have people flying in a place like this, correct?
And researchers, by and large, aren't stupid, so they're going to pick up on the fact that you may not know the long-term picture.
So, but the thing is that we really stronger institutions to create a stronger structure, a system, okay? I really think that this is really essential. But again, I go back. We really need a culture that believes that this is really important because we are used to do omelets without eggs. And our members of the government,
metaphors,
but our members of the government, many times they believe that is, yesterday when we were seeing the graphs, I was commenting, I can't remember who it was, I think it was with Miguel Castanho, I was commenting because the production of number of papers in Portugal is suddenly huge, okay, increasing very much, okay, but, very little money, correct? And this is just quantity, still not quality. It's another thing that we need to work. It's not quantity, is important, is a starting point, but we need quality. But when we had that, I said, if I send these two graphs to our Prime Minister or Minister of Science, say, but they are doing really well with very little money, so let's keep it that way. But they answered this to me. It's not, you can think that it's funny, but I have answers like that. But you guys are able to do it, so keep doing that. Good work, So it's really, we need to create this concept. No, we cannot do omelets without eggs. We had a minister before that used to say, we can do so much better with so little. And it's like, no, please, we can't.
And also, you don't want a situation where they're going, well, the Caixa are providing some eggs, so we don't need to. Mm-hmm. They've got to still be doing their part as well.
Exactly.
One more question from me before I open it up for comments and questions from you, but it seems an obvious one to ask. Maria, you talked about making the conscious choice to come back, but obviously there are lots of bright young researchers and ambitious young researchers, and some of them are both bright and ambitious, who go, well, I'm going to make the conscious choice to not be in Spain and Portugal. I'm going to go to the US or wherever else it is. Do we just have to accept that is the way of the world, or can we do more to at least make them come, fewer of them go and more of them come back?
No, we never need to accept that is the way the world should be, okay? The world should be the way we want to be, okay? We just need to fight for it until we cannot fight anymore, okay? So I really think we should never conform. But the reality, throughout time is that, of course, if you are very ambitious or something like that, probably you will think, oh, I should go for a period to United States or do my career in United States. I think there is also something even more global that we are facing now, that is the lack of interest of the new generations in science itself. Again, is why the culture is very important. There is lots of people that don't want to do postdocs or want to spend, want a job that they arrive at 9 and leave at 5 and all this type of thing. This is also very, something that we need to, science, you do it for passion, but you need conditions. The thing is that we need conditions to attract people. Life is not about only passion. They need to have the conditions. And that is something that the United States were able to offer to people is, yes, a space for you to dream, but also the conditions for you to dream. And that, I think, is a very important type of thing. And I really, believe that somehow, if we want to attract the best people, we cannot only attract, and in Portugal, many times we make this joke, we attract them because we have good weather and have good food or whatever. No, people, that you can have it for a weekend if you, and it's fine. So we really need to have so much more than that. And in that, again, the forest is very important because there is a lot of, I would not say unsuccess, but there is a lot of people that will not stay, the vast majority will not stay in academic world, will not be researchers in academic world. So we need also to create a forest because to create other types of trees that you can jump from one to the other. And it's something that in Portugal at least is still is missing. We don't have industry, we don't have, another type of, opportunities that people, if they don't stay in the academic world, they can have. And I think this would be also very important to attract very bright people, very enthusiastic people, people that really want to be part of a new culture.
Valentín.
If the hypothesis or the question is people to come back, there are two options that I see today. One is the one that Singapore and other Asian countries have done. They send people there, but they are obliged to come back. Otherwise, they don't have the passport. And they spend 3-5 years and so forth. That's one aspect. The other is be sponsored by an institution. For example, I have 5 people at this moment working with me in New York that are going back to CNIC, because that is part of the program that you have in the center. So I think these are the two ways. If you go for free and you work very hard, you will stay in the United States.
But isn't there a risk with that? If you make it that they're forced to come back, that will make more of them maybe want not to come back.
Well, look, anybody, I cannot now making an ethical discussion here. The only thing I'm just telling you is that if you want to reinforce the Spanish investigational pool of young people, I think you have these two options. And I'm talking about, then I can tell you there's a third option. Please, my son wants to go out, go to the United States and see what happens. But this is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking to reinforce the Spanish system. And I think, at least from an institutional point of view, whether it's CNIC or something else, is to send people out as part of the program. And this actually, I want to say, this comes the private public funding, which I don't want to enter into this because there's a lot to do with this.
Okay, we've heard a lot about
but there is still there is still a third way of doing this, is that, yes, people could be sent away, but you have conditions to attract these people or other people from other countries. So you can, but that you need to have the conditions and you need to have the eggs to offer and the apples and everything.
Okay, I said enough of me, more of you. And as usual, good to see you. Let's go there first, since you've got the microphone.
I really appreciate that we're talking about resources, right? Because at the end, I think science has become more and more resource-driven, right? And I mean, the fact that actually the sequencing, we all know, requires a lot of resource. So we need to put that on the table. But there's another resource which I think we have to be very mindful of, which is time, right? Time is the most precious resource existing. You cannot stretch it. You cannot fund it whatsoever.
Tell me about it.
And exactly, right? I mean, that's why we all want to solve aging, right? So, but and I think also all of us here know really important breakthrough science requires time, right? And I think here there is also something which we need to be mindful in terms of what are we expecting, right? There's no shortcuts, and obviously as PIs, we hack the system, right? So we take a postdoc fellowship for 2 years, we take a grant for 2 or 3 years, right? But I think we might be actually giving the wrong message to our funding agencies, which is, yes, you can do a project in 2 or 3 years, and this will be a paper, right? So I would find it interesting to have an honest assessment from PIs. What is the real time it took a project, a paper, from day one to, and we could do it like, anonymously, so no one gets in trouble with whatever reports they wrote. But I think to really give an honest assessment to the funders of what it means to have, the papers we all want, or the patent we all want, or that breakthrough we all want. Because I think the instability also comes from the time factor, right? And I think there is always this idea that also scientists will abuse time they get, right? And I think this is the other thing which, coming from Switzerland and Austria, I was a bit surprised here, is this culture of the scientists are always gonna fake it and we're not gonna have consequences, right? At Champalimau, I don't have tenure. I get evaluated every 4 years, right? And it's an up or out, and therefore, there is a consequence if I don't keep on performing. And I think it's okay because I get resources to be able to do that. But I think this idea of giving time, evaluate post-hoc, and then keep on going, and not this project by project thinking, I think this is something which has to enter the discussion, because it's not only going to be about time, money, it's also going to be about time. I think this is the other key resource.
Mm-hmm. I think the issue you are touching one aspect that I think is very important is time. And time is, we can split this concept in 2 different aspects. One is this morning came in our session, very important in this atmosphere that we are discussing. One of the issues that also Valentín brought is the basic clinical research point. And we talked this morning about protecting time for the clinical aspect, that I think at a certain point I would like to go back to this point. But also the terms of time in our project, that's what I refer to have. We need to introduce in our institutions and our funding agencies that in addition to the time limited by the unit of time of project, that is 3-year project, there is something else to build a competitive, creative, innovative, and risky science that is a longer perspective. And sometimes when you discuss that, they say, well, you want security. It's not something that we want to fight with security, because intrinsic to our work is the need to evaluation. And evaluation is something intrinsic, and this is something that is there and cannot be another way. But in addition to evaluation that requires a period of 4 or 5 years, we have to have a funding perspective in that the risky projects require more than 3, 4, or 5 years period. And I go back to my project, the project that we are leading. I mean, we now are generating new information on data that we collected 10 years ago in our patients, in our samples, that we have created a huge amount of data that we are generating that. If there is not this perspective, that there are lines, we could call it programs, or we could call it research lines, that needs to be built with a more perspective. And this is nothing to do with the fact that it needs to be strongly evaluated. But we have to include these concepts. And that has a repercussion for La Caixa or any funding agency. We have in Spain, I guess in Portugal, a good programs for projects, very little funding. I mean, the most you can get in a project is 300, 400, 4,000 for 3 years. That's it, except La Caixa and the Spanish Association for Cancer Research, that they can give you for a coordinated project 1 million. That's it. Beyond that, we need to get some kind of a stable funding, stable always with evaluation, but stable to go beyond that, because there are resources, there are people that need to take care of these resources, to maintain the biobank of more than 1,000 patients. It cost me in my institution more than 20,000 euros per year. And I cannot apply this to any of the official projects because they don't accept this fund. Where I get this one? And the people to take care of the samples. I mean, there are issues that go beyond the 3-year periods. And that's what one of the issues that I wanted. We need to go a step further with the idea of science going. Otherwise, it's difficult to risk in the future.
And also to have stability, because you need stuff that's not all geared to what is new.
Yeah, stability, but evaluated. Yeah. And this is something that has to go together. Otherwise, we get the typical professor of the university that never goes out because nothing. So I think these two concepts have to go together, and they are needed, but both.
Valentín.
It's difficult to say, but it's not I am an investigator. I am a good investigator. I'm just saying this because many people say they are investigators. And what happens is you have a grant 3 years and it's over. And I talk now with my hat from the United States. 50% of people who really get into an investigational career, they don't make it after 3 years. And the reason is I don't think they have the prospect that you are discussing. You need to have something long-term that you can present, that your mind is not just those 3 years. So I think that the system has to be surveilled, has to be very strict, and although it's difficult for us to say they're investigators and people who are not so at that level, I think we have to, the reality is that we have to really go after the people who are real investigators and they have a long-term view. They are able to risk their careers because it's always very tough, the investigational career. The stability is difficult, but that's what it is. And I think we have to really be sure that not everybody can be an investigator and just the 3 years and it's over, and why they don't give me more. That's a problem.
And not everybody who's an investigator survives. There is evolutionary forces at work here. Now, there were a couple of hands, and there's a microphone there, so guys, come on in.
I wanted to continue with that concept of what should we ask for. And it's very easy to ask for money. And the government now, yesterday, they said, we're going to put more money on the National Research Plan. We're going to put more money on this funding strategy. But this comes without strategy. The thing is, that there are different aspects. One is what happens, what is the long-term plan? Is this funding going to be progressively increasing or not? This is impossible to achieve because we have a valley of death that is the election, and then another political party comes and needs to change something. So
they're likely to make an issue of cutting it as this one has been of adding it. Yeah.
Exactly. And the other thing is predictability. And this is something that for La Caixa we can put it on the table, but because it becomes obvious that researchers need to know when a call is coming out. Researchers need to know when the money will be activated. If you don't know this, you have these voids of funding that are suicidal for research projects. You cannot plan ahead. And as it was pointed out, the time of, so in this specific call, in research, in health, it's impossible to achieve a high risk result in 3 years. So we know that 3 years is only to get you half through the project, and then perhaps I was just talking yesterday how many of the groups that were in this first call asked for an extension. For how many of them the extension, apart from getting through the delays, also allowed the project to mature. And this tells you that time is not necessarily being a substitute for more money, but rather for maturity. And we are going into a direction where the thesis projects are being shorter, so the maturity of the researchers is less, their CV is weaker, so we are not giving them time to grow and be more competent towards the future. And also, as it was mentioned, we are not putting in parallel money with career development plans. So how many researchers want to be group leaders? And what are the alternatives? So how much critical mass are we losing by not enabling permanent positions that could be revised? So this idea of is like jail, permanent but revised. In Spain it was put together. So I have a permanent position revised. If I do bad 2 revisions in a row, they can fire me. which is fair. I have a minimal requirement that I need to meet. So this peace of mind of nobody's going to evaluate me doesn't work anymore. But we need to give people the sense of peace of mind that I have certain stability to grow in a position that is not necessarily a group leader position, staff scientist, all the possible alternatives to build a robust scientific system. It doesn't work only with the group leaders or with established group leaders. So it has to be multicolor and multi-strategic.
Yeah. They are breaching monies, excuse me if I interfere here. If you are in a setting that investigation is important, how many times we have given breaching monies on somebody who finishes 3 years and you give a chance? This is critical. So I wouldn't, anyway, you don't say if somebody you think is a good investigator and at 3 years it seems you don't have the data you would like and you think you try to get breaching monies from an institution in which research is important.
I think there are two aspects here, and I think were pointed here very well. That is the fact that there is what is the project funding, and there is what is the structure type of funding, and they need to go side by side with strategy. Okay, the problem is that they need to come from different sources, and many times, yes, you have governments that just put more money on. Our doesn't even do that, but okay, put more money on without strategy, without sometimes go through the forest and see which trees need to be cleaned. Do you see things like that? So it's really, this needs to be really, is very important. But I take the freedom, okay, to even propose some pragmatic things. So, for example, in terms of the La Caixa and in terms of the research funding, yes, I think it's obvious that, and we discussed last night, so I hope you don't mind that I bring it here, but like it's true that
for those at the back, she's making close eye contact with Nacho in front of her.
It's like, it's obviously the 3 year is shorter, okay, and should be 5 year, okay, something like that, but should not be, might not be also. Another thing that La Caixa may want to consider is to do something like HHMI does in the United States. You know, why not for the Peninsula Iberia? There is a kind of a pool of investigators that are heavily evaluated, but some of them would keep it for longer, or could, you know, there is a kind of renovation or ability to renovate. Of course, then we all count that this is going to happen, and it would never be possible because I'm sure that they make their calculations, and this is not because you always need fresh blood to enter. But I'm sure that they are good on making calculations about money, so they can know exactly what type of system could be created to the Peninsula Iberia. And I really think we need a system like that that is project-driven type of funding, but with a strategic design. Okay, that is one thing. The other thing is
they should not put all their eggs for that omelette in one basket.
Exactly. So I would say that that would be really important for La Caixa to think about it, because of course for us it's more easy to say it than to do it and find a way of doing it. But I really think, again, there are examples in the world. HHMI is a very good example what it does to the United States. But at the same time, this will be a kind of, you know, all these, and I think what La Caixa does is an elite program. So you need to have structures to be stronger and to be well-funded. You see, obviously, you know, you need to have the biobanks, you need to have all the infrastructures of an institution to be funded with a core structure. And in Portugal, at least, you know, either is like the Champalimau, the Gulbenkian Institute, that they have foundations on their back, and obviously this infrastructure comes from that, which is obviously very good and should continue to be like that. But other ones that are dependent on public funding, that is also competitive, so we really don't even know when it's going to be evaluated, because it's depending on an evaluation. The type of evaluation decides the amount of money, but according to which government is there is really something that sometimes is every 5 years, sometimes is immediately after 2 or 3 years because a new government came and didn't trust the other one. So it's very difficult for an institution to plan, and this should be transversal, because if we really have a culture, if you really believe that science is important for our society, this should be independent of whatever ideology is governing a country. That is part of our culture, is again why culture is so important.
Okay, now I'm aware that precious resource time is slipping away. We haven't had enough comments yet from yourselves, and I want to get as many as we can. So I'm going to say to the panel, from now on, shortest answers that you're comfortable with, and we'll get as many points in as we can. Now, there was a hand there and a microphone there.
So thanks. So I'll share a little bit my experience. So I did postdoc in New York, not Maria did at NYU, I did at Rockefeller. And my boss, he had HHMI support, right? So this is the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. So he was a HHMI investigator. He was an HHMI investigator during 26 years. He lost, eventually lost, right? Because now he's approaching retiring. He lost that status. But the basic term for HHMI, it's 7 years, right? So if you get it for sure for 7 years. And then up to that time, you get your HHMI renewal, right? And what they ask is, show me your best 3 papers. That's what they ask, right? And of course, you have to also propose a project. We want to follow up this, we want to follow up that, we have this new area, right? And so, and to me, HHMI, I see HHMI in America as the ERC in Europe, or maybe La Caixa in Iberia, right? The public, we have to compare to the NIH, the National Institute of Health, or the NSF, the National Science Foundation, right? And again, so in NIH, everybody aspires to have the so-called R01 grant, and that's a 4 to 5 years grant, which funds, that's the main, I mean, they have like they spread out throughout the country 30 or 40 billion US dollars a year in these grants, right? And that's how they fund the system. Of course, grants are much bigger than our National Science Foundation in Portugal. They are longer.
Well, I think that's an artistic conclusion.
No, I'll just add. I'll reply to Carol's question.
Yeah.
So we just published a paper in Nature Communications early this year. That was a 10-year project in my lab.
Okay, I think Nacho would like to comment on in the front here. And Nacho, same rules apply to you, please. Keep it brief because you've got the advantage of having the podium later as well. So a microphone's coming your way, I hope.
Nobody has a microphone, no.
I don't know if that's going to be faded up, is it?
Use this one.
Yeah, they won't be expecting that, so come on in.
No, it's just because to reply direct.
Yeah.
Direct comments. Maybe the thing is that not enough foundations in Spain and Portugal to do that, because the ecosystem in other HHMA, I mean, there are several others there. La Caixa Foundation in the last years has been doing many things since there was a decision of the Board of Trustees of make research in health the third pillar of its activity, and since then there are pre-doctoral fellowships, the postdoctoral fellowships, and then this call and the innovation calls and so on and so forth. And you know, as I said in the first day, structural funds with research centers and the new project of the new research center. One of the principles of philanthropy and foundations is subsidiarity. So you normally try to be and to do what the state that is not doing. And when we decided to do the health research call and put 1 million to the big projects here, we took a serious look of what the minister in Spain was doing, not Portugal, because at the moment we weren't there yet, and he's doing less than the Spanish ministry here. And what the ERC, the European Research Council, was doing with a 2.5 million grant. So we tried to place somewhere in the middle to find what was not being done in Spain at that time, right? Of course, an HHMI scheme of 7 year with evaluation and the possibility of having another one, this would be great to have in Spain. And maybe some days this would be in the agenda, the first thing, probably, yes. So thank you for the suggestion. But the great thing would be that there would be other foundations that could follow this path, and the state as well.
But under the current grant scheme of grants that you have, if you were to extend, right, now it's like a 3-year grant, maybe extendable to 4. If you were to give a 4-year grant, extendable to 5, with the same money, you would actually spend.
Yeah, this is something on the table with the team. Yeah. This is absolutely on the table.
Because from funding agencies, we have 3 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we're going to stop that before it turns into live haggling over time. Maybe one here.
Yeah, so I'll have a bit to summarize things. Thanks for the discussion. I think all the scientists would like to speak in circles. I heard this conversation on stability, lack of money, and the short periods of time over and over, and we sort of boil in our juice all the time. You know, we speak to our peers, and this is a bit exhausting because we never move forward in my lifetime.
How do we move forward? Because that is the goal.
So that's the question.
Yeah.
And it's good to have Elías here, who probably engages with the Catalan government, and Maria with the Portuguese government, and Valentín with the Madrid and the Spanish government. How do we reach the people who have the money in the pot? That's culture, so it's the people who vote, and the politicians do it for the people who vote, what they think would be more popular. How do we change this pattern and start complaining among ourselves about the obvious problem and reach out to the people who make decisions? Singapore is a good example. What the Catalan government did a few years ago is a good example. How do we change this in Spain and Portugal? Who is the people to talk to? Are you talking to them?
Maria, do you want to respond briefly?
As you can see, I don't have any problems to talk, so so I talk to everyone. So everyone that I can reach, I can tell you that the things that I'm saying here now, I've been saying for the last 15 years at least, to every member of the government that I have been in front of me, and there have been many, and from prime ministers to ministers of sciences, of education, this and that, and nothing much. A few things have happened, obviously, things have evolved, but it's very, very slow, and I think it will be very slow until we really are convinced, because they do it. How can I say this? Why I consider, I don't want to be, the same all the time, saying all the time the same thing, but culture is very important. They cannot do it because I almost, we are requesting something. No, they need to do it because it's really the key thing to do. And that is the most difficult part, to make them believe that this is really something that is key, is essential for the country to progress, because I can understand if you are a member of the government, you are not only worried about science and worried about the institutions and this and that. So they are obviously have a much bigger, supposedly, view, or should have a bigger view, what could be making the country moving forward, or making the country stronger. And that is where is missing, is that them really believing, and not be only on words, because then becomes very fashionable, and they have all these keywords, but really to say science and discovery science is the only way that we have to create new things in our country, and that will make our country to our countries. And I'm not patriotic specifically, okay, because we do science for the entire world, but it's really make politicians saying that this is a good bet on putting money.
Valentín, I'm still clinging to the optimism you started with here. Things are getting better.
I am optimistic.
Good.
United States, I have a fund that comes from foundations for breaching monies. And I have a special fund. And they like to do it, but they don't pay taxation. In Spain, it's different. It's an issue of taxation. But in CNIC, we have also programs that can breach people to move forward after a certain time. So I think I certainly believe in the private enterprise. I'm sorry to say that, but it's a reality. And I'm not talking about pharmaceutical companies. I'm talking about people that really want to support investigation. And there are many people who, even in Spain, with the taxation issue, are capable to help. So I think you don't have to even go to the governments. I don't think it's just. I think you can do it privately, and there are many people who like to help that.
Yeah, I think to talk, you need the other side also wanted to talk. So I think it's important to follow certain strategies. There are issues that have to be addressed by governments, and we talk some of them. We have a legislation, I don't know in English, the tax-free for donations, the law, the administrative law that we have in science that is in Spain. So there are things that are at certain levels. There are La Caixa Foundation, there are private that I think we need to talk, and that's what we are doing here, but also in our institutions. I mean, I feel the responsibility as the director of a research institute that we need to talk, to imagine in our limitations, what are the transforming things that we could implement in our institutions? And I think that also with the limitations is important. We have to have these ideas. We discussed in our institution 10 years ago, we started a program to protect time for clinicians. And that came from the discussion in our center. We have little money. We can only pay 10 doctors. But if we got money, but this is an idea that came from the hospitals in which we are talking. I mean, it's important to discuss in our institutions how to implement these ideas. So there are certain different levels that have the capacity to transform what we are doing now. In this sense, I also am a little optimistic, because if we are having certain responsibilities in the management of science in our environment, if we have these ideas that we are creating in these discussions, we will be able to implement them. With limitations, but I think these discussions are important to imagine which are the measures that we need to implement.
Okay, no need to apologise for being optimistic or patriotic or supporting the private sector. We've got time, we're really out of time, but you've been sitting there with the microphone for a while, so please.
Yes, politicians are moved by votes, and votes depend on people. So I think that we need to push up the culture and the idea in people that their health depends on our research. Probably the example of COVID was quite clear. If you put money on something, the results of research are quick and appear and are used. So we should take advantage of that example that is very recent and help to create that culture of people asking to their politicians that research should be pushed, and voting for people who have, for politicians who have in their programs this pushing of research. So probably in addition to going to the politicians, we should be able to go to the public and be able to transmit, not that we are curing the cancer, because probably they are fed up with our news about curing the cancer every day, but building the idea that putting money into education and research will benefit them very quickly.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to take one last, if you can try and make this kind of climactic, that would be great. So this will be the final question.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I'm sort of optimistic regarding research and how researchers are doing, and I'm really pessimistic regarding governments. In the case of Spain, you know, the main problem is not the lack of money. The main problem is the lack of interest. There are total lack of interest for research. This is chronic. Somebody has any hints that I'm wrong, I would be happy to hear it. But there is total lack of interest historically from ever. But you know, we have very good examples here. For example, I'm here because there is something that exists in Catalonia that's called ICRIA, right? So here you have an incredible example. Last week we had the annual meeting of ICRIA, 25 years going on. ICRIA has 275 researchers from all over, and in 25 years have been able to brought to Spain, to Catalonia, more than $1 billion in American terms, so $100 million, a little bit more than that. So what created ICRIA? Two things. One, a person that really is not very much politician, but it has very clear ideas, and also a politician, but is very smart guy, and the other one interest, basically interest, and the money came like this. So, in terms, the COVID is another example. And the COVID worked very well in Spain. What are the heroes in the COVID? So the institutions, the medical institutions. If it were because of the administration, everything was disastrous. I mean, there was no planning at all. Every institution, did the planning itself. It was like to be in the trenches. So what we need exactly is, I think, is this interest. I don't know how to create this interest in a country like Spain. I don't know how, but there are people and there are means, and that in all these situations sometimes things work well. And I put like ICRIA as an example. So sometimes we don't need really more committees. There were way in the newspaper committees about how to improve things. We know how to do it.
Okay, thank you. That's going to have to be pretty much the final thought. But I'm just going to hear briefly from a panel one last take-home thought on all this. Elias, I'll start with you.
Well, I mean, ICRIA is great, and I think we all agree, but just to say that we still have many points to touch in following meetings is what Valentín said. But ICRIA, that is a great thing, at 70 will take you out. What we do with the perspective, even a very good initiative has their own limitations. So I think we have to work with a global perspective to change, to keep changing things, and we have to keep pushing.
Thank you. Maria?
I think, the motto here, we are stronger if we come together. That is no doubt. And I think is, for me, the final message that I would like to leave is that, yes, we can work together to make things stronger. We can work locally to make sure that locally things start to work, but we can create, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Others have found solutions, so we really need just to implement these other solutions in our regions, okay? But that will not happen, in my point of view, if we don't change the entire culture. And this takes time, obviously, but we need to start. I'm not so sure if it's just immediately to go to people and contact people. The culture also starts by some elites, okay? The elites need to be, it's not only the political elite, the different types of elites of individuals, they need to be really the ones that pass the message, and this becomes really important. Okay?
Yeah, and get better at meeting the people who've invented the wheel. Mm-hmm. Finally, Valentín.
Things have improved in the last 15 years because it goes from the bottom up. I don't believe we'll go from the politicians down. No. Absolutely skeptical. The politicians change every 3 days anyway. And there are laws every 3 days. But this is exactly, to me, the future is you, the people. And then society, when I talk about private enterprise, I talk about the Caixa, and there's a lot of possibilities there that we have to really motivate them. And can only be motivated by us, by people here. So I believe from the bottom up, governments, I'm sorry to tell you, but I feel quite skeptical. Mm-hmm. Okay. But things have improved.
Things have improved, and we work from the bottom up, and we network, and we do the other things. I think a lot of positive ideas from our trio with Brio. Can we please thank them one more time? Elías Campo, Maria Mota, Valentín Fuster. And you're free to leave the stage, or you can stay there if you want, because we're nearly done, but I've been asked to do something that I find very tricky to do, which is try and do some kind of summary of this, which is difficult when you're chairing things, but I've been helped a lot because Maribel, who was doing the other parallel session this morning, has given me some ideas, and Christina, who's been our rapporteur, has given me some ideas as well. So I now have 3 bits of paper to juggle. I've not seen what's on the other 2, which were handed to me shortly before I got here. Actually, sorry, 4 bits of paper. There's 2 here. So I'm going to try. I think I might take the advantage of sitting down for a moment. So this may or may not sense. You can play the game, if you like, of which points are mine and which points are other people's. That can add to it. So I'm going to start with this. The transfer process is complex and time-consuming, but it is ultimately for the benefit of the patient. And I've got, what have I got here? This is just a summary of what people have actually done. Okay, it's essential to translate basic results into clinics, key building up new units in translational science. Being together, scientists and clinicians encourages serendipity and curiosity. The best ideas are in the happy hour. That is definitely one we can echo, I feel. There's nothing like a castle with its own botanical gardens and gorgeous coastal views to relax participants and encourage engagement, so I'd recommend using this regularly and doing this regularly. You're all now part of something, a cohort, a gang, a tribe. Your thoughts and suggestions can make something better. As Nacho said, your conversations are gold, so please keep that river of gold flowing. Take advantage of more experienced entrepreneurs. Pay attention to CaixaResearch programs, validate and consolidate. Their proximity is really important. That's physical proximity, but it's also technological proximity and educational proximity that can break down barriers and be proactive in terms of serendipity. There's a ridiculous number of projects represented here, not just ones we've heard about from the speakers, but a lot of projects that all have enormous potential to treat untreatable diseases like Parkinson's, to give us vivid insights into cellular processes and the mess, as Rod Cunha put it, that is our brain, to change survival rates for heart failure, to help us age better, and even the potential to have that third cup of coffee without feeling guilty, which I did just before this session. Now, you people need to appreciate how good you are at doing good and the difference you're making. We've been talking about the government changing every 3 days, said Valentín just as he kind of went off stage. But actually, we've had less than a day, and maybe we have changed things as well. And finally, from me, why is it that when talking about the benefits of enabling technology that the PowerPoint pointer starts acting up? Was it jealousy? So that is my sort of attempt to sum up. Lunch is looming, but just before I hand over to Nacho to formally end things, I just want to thank the backstage team, the people, the tech team who are doing everything as well, all the people from the Arm and Connection who've helped this, Jordi and Natalia and Ainoa from La Caixa for all their help as well, anybody else I've forgotten to mention, and of course yourselves. This would not have worked if we hadn't had your input, your ideas, your involvement, your questions, your comments. Sorry we didn't get to all of them in all instances, but from my point of view, this has been really positive, and I'm not from Portugal or Spain. That is it for me. It's been a pleasure now to bring us to a close, bring us full circle to where we started, and most importantly, to act as an aperitif before lunch. Please welcome back the man we started with yesterday, Nacho, or more formally, the Director of Relations with Research and Health Institutions at the La Caixa Foundation, Ignacio Lopez.
Maybe we could start thanking Quentin for his moderation, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
No, I don't want to rob any more time, but only 2 ideas about, I think, the objectives we shared in the first talk have been accomplished. I would say that there are 2 things. One, the interaction between you, or among you. So we decided not only to do these grants, but as well to try to foster a new ecosystem of researchers together with us that can continue these discussions in the future. And I believe for the shine in your eyes during the coffee breaks and the social events that this has been happening. So thank you very much for that. And the other is the interaction, and most importantly for us, between you and us, which is, as Quentin said before, as we said at some point, that it's really gold. And we've been getting great ideas to try to make our programs better in the future. We have been discussing about many things, talent attraction, but as well smaller thing in the smaller groups, like for example, the importance of data interoperability and all the efforts that we have to do in this regard of the narratives, how the impact narrative may negatively affect the assessment of basic research. Many amazing, many interesting problems that we have to take into account when we design our programs, and we will do so. So the 5-year proposal is on the table. Of course, the MD for PhD program and Howard Hughes Medical Institute scheme for Spain, that is on the table, but maybe for the future, not in the immediate present. But in any case, all the ideas are going to be taken into account for our future conversations. And for that, I would like to thank you again. Specifically because you came here with not a lot of, we did our most in explaining you which were our intentions here, but you acted a bit as guinea pigs, both for this program, but as well for Cap Roig. You know that the La Caixa Foundation has decided that this is going to be a place where, for reflection and ideas in the areas of interest of La Caixa Foundation, not only research, but as well culture and social issues. So thank you for being the first ones. I believe that you should be proud of it as well, because I believe that the success of this meeting is making that we believe, at least the team at La Caixa, that the Cap Roig Health Meeting will take place in the future, in the coming future as well. So thank you very much for that. And thank you very much for your openness to a transparent discussion with us. You did already, you thanked almost everyone, but I would like to thank as well the Scientific Advisory Board of La Caixa. Dr. Valentín Fuster here is not only an awardee of the first call, but as well a distinguished member of our Scientific Advisory Board that took the idea of having this meeting and help us in shaping it in the form that it took, so thank you very much. And in relation to the Caixa Research team, they have been doing a great job, not only in the content with Jordi, but as well in the designing of the call, Irene and Carla, Montse, but as well Monica, Jorge, Alex, Eva, and Sonia, but as well the people in helping that everything goes smooth, Natalia Ferran, and Ainhoa, and as well director of Caixa Forum Girona and Cap Roig, Ana Colomer. Finally, just to tell you that this is just the beginning, we would like that you keep a bit part of your heart with the Caixa Research community. You count with us as part of this forest that you were saying, and to help us reflect on how we can develop our role in the ecosystem of research, biomedical research in Spain and Portugal in the future. With that, thank you very much and enjoy your lunch. Thank you.